Hi, and welcome to the ComicCrush.com's first YouTube experience. I'm your host, Paul, as always. Normally we would do this as a podcast, but we're shifting to video for this. I'm here with Liz.
Hello.
Returning co-host from a way back. I'm sure many of you remember. Today we are going to be talking about WandaVision, which is the MCU's first TV show, streaming now on Disney Plus, episodes 1 and 2. That went live yesterday. So if you haven't caught it yet, don't watch this. Go and watch that first. We will invariably give away spoilers, sometimes inadvertently, sometimes on purpose. But we don't want to ruin the experience for you, so do go and watch that show now. It's a really good show, at least I think it is. We'll see what Liz thinks in a minute. But yeah, MCU's first show. Just going to remind you, you can follow The Comic Crush at The Comic Crush on Twitter, at The Comic Crush on Instagram, and you can find us on Facebook, the comiccrush.com page. You can go there. We update every day nearly with new articles, new podcasts, news. It's a very curated look at comics. So if you like that stuff, it's not one of those channels where you get every single thing that's happening in comics, but it is kind of a nicely curated look, even if I do say so myself. We'd appreciate your support on the Patreon. You can find that on the website, and you can also buy something from our web store where we sell single issues, single copies of new number ones. All of that helps support the channel. So without further ado, we're going to jump right into WandaVision. Liz, going in, what were you expecting from this? Because I kind of got something along the lines of what I was expecting, but there were quite a few surprises. So going into this, the first MCU show, did the experience live up to what you were expecting?
Well, I think it's a really interesting choice for a first MCU show, because it is such a departure from what you get from the films. Basically, the films, I really don't think you could do anything like this with the movies. And I like that it takes this totally different tack and basically, goes out there with, its own complete identity and saying, like, the rules all change. As soon as, it becomes a Disney Plus show, we can tell really different kinds of stories from what people think they've come to expect from the movies. Anybody who accuses Marvel movies of being homogenous, it's kind of going out and saying, well, you know what, those rules don't apply. We can do whatever we want, which I really loved about it.
And I think one of the important things that it does, because if you look at the relationship between Wanda and the Vision in the movies, you kind of start with this thing where they start off kind of as adversaries in Age of Ultron. You then jump and they're kind of pals in Civil War. And then by the time you get to Infinity War, they're lovers. But you haven't seen that relationship really grow in any kind of full way because of the way the movies are done, because of things that get cut out from, as they sort of edit the films and things. But I don't think that relationship was really given a lot of space, which is something Marvel does a lot, actually. They take big leaps in the relationships. Obviously the critical one is, for me, was Bucky, where I wasn't necessarily convinced in Winter Soldier that it was such a wound for Cap, because
right, going from the first Cap movie to Winter Soldier, a lot of people, almost didn't recognize Bucky to begin with. People who didn't have a comics background, didn't make that connection right away. I think it's because they are such big action stories that sometimes the romantic relationships and things like that get short shrift as far as how much they'll be able to spend time developing them. But as definitely applies to Scarlet Witch and the Vision. So, I think to be able to give them like a story like this and make you understand, because even in the comics, they're kind of a weird relationship where it's like, oh, okay, so he's a robot and she's an all-powerful witch and they're married or they're together, or, I think you need to see some of that development to really buy it. Particularly with him being the Vision, being, essentially a sentient robot.
Yeah. Which they kind of they move him into this sort of human form in Infinity War, which we hadn't seen before.
Right.
And you, at first, I thought when you're looking at that scene where they're kind of just walking down the street together, that was for the benefit of anyone who might see them, just the Joe public. But he also keeps that form when they're alone together, which was quite interesting because previously he hadn't. And obviously in this, you see him shedding that form quite a few times when he's alone with Wanda. So I kind of wonder what wonder what the thinking was there. But yeah, the relationship did kind of, although it's not a surprise to anyone who's read the comics, because of course they have a long-standing relationship. It kind of did sideswipe me a bit in Infinity War, just a little, because it's just like, oh, okay, I guess this is just the thing, and it seems to be there almost to serve the fact that by the time you get to Endgame, someone's got to be really angry with Thanos enough to take him down, and that was kind of an interesting thing. But there is a thing in the movies where the writers, and I know the Russos especially, are very much, this thing won't happen until we need it to happen. So, Cap doesn't learn about Bucky until he needs to learn about Bucky. There won't be this reveal until there absolutely needs to be this reveal. Because their problem is then you've got to shift through tons and tons of backstory.
Right.
And I think in a way, what the TV shows allow them to do is to have a kind of backstory, even though it's, as far as we know, retroactive, which is something I kind of want to get into as we talk about it. But overall, I'm really impressed with the show. Like the first couple of episodes.
Yeah.
It's definitely, again, it was kind of as weird as I expected it to be, given the trailers and things and all the rumor stuff that we'd heard. But also beyond what I expected it to be. So I'm kind of really happy having watched it.
Now, when you said you wanted to get into the fact that, supposedly retroactive. Now,
well, here's the thing. So I'm going to spout off a few of my kind of fan theories, if you like. Sorry, they're probably all going to be wrong because invariably 9 times out of 10, I'm always wrong.
That's true.
No, not about quality of tasteless. Come on, just about fan theories. I'm not as immersed as in you as in the MCU or Marvel Comics. Which is why you're here. You're here to be the expert and the voice of comics reason, I think. And for the first time ever, you're the voice of reason. But you don't know when this is taking place. You're not given an indication, really, because of this time setting, that this isn't taking place between Civil War and Infinity War, for example. You don't know.
You don't. That's true.
It's certainly not the world as we know it and not the world as they know it. But you're not told that it's taking place in any particular point in time in the series. We're just assuming going in, oh, well, the last time we saw Scarlet Witch, she was kicking Thanos' ass all over the place. And the last time we saw Vision, he was dead.
Right.
So, but, we're not really given an indication that this is taking place after those stories. And I was wondering what you thought about that. Do you have an idea?
I have a very strong opinion of what this is a riff on, which, inevitably we were going to talk about because I'm sure everybody's going to talk about it. But, very obviously to me, this is their little riff on House of M. Right. Sort of, early Bendis, Vision kills the, or Scarlet Witch kills the Vision rather, loses it, and basically imagines her into reality these two children, who she then feels she has to protect by creating this whole warped reality around her to support this fantasy that's going on in her head. So we all know, if you know the Scarlet Witch, she has the power to warp all of reality. Now, we don't really know if that's what this is per se, or if this is all just taking place inside her head. But my suspicion is this is the fantasy that she's created for herself after the Vision's death, which she did have to, be the one to kill him in Infinity War. So her form of escapism is to create this idyllic, 1950s, 1960s sitcom world, where everything is nice and everything is happy and they're a couple and everything's as she ever dreamed it might be. So to me, that's the main storyline I can see that they are borrowing from. Even though House of M is very different, it kind of brings in all the different characters from, the X-Men and the Avengers, and they're all living in this alternate fantasy where they've got totally different lives. That doesn't seem to be the case here, although there is at least one familiar face from, Marvel stories past that we've met in a different Marvel movie.
Sure.
Which is Monica Rambeau.
Yeah. And the interesting thing is, so we know that possibly then that it is set in a sort of recent time, because obviously when we last saw Monica Rambeau, she was just sort of about 5 years old, 6 years old, something like that. Very young kid, way back in Captain Marvel, which is set in the 90s. One of the interesting things I noticed about, I've been rereading House of M. You may recognize this copy, Liz.
That's because it's my copy.
So I've been rereading this today, and one of the interesting things that leapt out of me this time reading it is that for a large part of this book, Wanda is absent. She actually doesn't feature in the book
nearly as much as you would think. She's the catalyst for the story, but she's not, as far as playing a huge role in it. She kind of, is there as a catalyst, and then she's there for sort of the end cap of the story. But it's still one of those stories that I always associate as being about the Scarlet Witch.
Yeah.
Even though she actually plays a fairly small role in the sort of central plot.
And also it's assumed in the book that she has reset reality. You don't actually really know that 100% because you never actually see her do or say, at least at the beginning, incite a kind of inciting spell or do something that resets reality.
Yeah, she's doing it subconsciously. She doesn't even realize that that's what she's doing. She's so sort of like enmeshed in this fantasy that she's created for herself that she believes it's real. And so it wasn't like a conscious choice where she, sort of stood up with her magic wand and said, I'm going to change all of reality. I think it was very sort of insidious the way it sort of spread out to everyone else.
Yeah. And it is a fascinating story, I'm really enjoying rereading it.
It's really good. Oh, it's like one of my real all-time favorite Marvel event books.
And we'll get to another comic, which I'm sure everyone will know what comic we're going to deal with, that has a very much seemed to have an influence on this, especially by the time we get to the end of episode 2. I've got a little theory, though, that I'm not sure it is just House of M they're riffing on.
Okay.
because I seem to remember there was a story, and it is a story I haven't read. I have to say, not being the biggest Marvel reader, I'm more of a fan of the Marvel movies. I've said that many times on podcasts and things. But I seem to remember there was a crossover event, like a fairly small crossover event. Was it Pleasant Hill?
Oh, yeah. What was the actual name of that event, though?
Yeah.
The Pleasant Hill thing was, oh God, what was it called? It was from a couple of years ago.
Yeah, see, and it's
Mhm,
completely vanished now,
mhm.
because I think it was kind of coming to an end just as
Yeah, it was like an expensive
and
storyline.
yeah.
Brought in like Baron Zemo and stuff. Uh,
Now, one of the interesting things about that is it deals with a constructed reality that is a suburb
yeah,
in America, where they house a lot of the sort of more dangerous supervillains by convincing them that they are kind of just living in this suburb, right? That they're not really in a prison, and it's a prison designed by Shield. And I wonder if they've kind of just flipped the instigators for this, and it's not Shield. It might be, and also this is what made me kind of think: is it Hydra? Is it? Because we've had some indications that there may be the hand of Hydra, and
well, yeah.
even
I mean, you remember
Strucker.
the little commercials and things.
Yeah,
Strucker watch with the high
yeah.
logo on it. Yeah, that was also. Um, it,
And I wonder if they're maybe using Wanda's powers to kind of create this artificial reality for their own purposes. Because also you have a bunch of characters who seem to be asking Wanda for help. Who want you seem to be trapped somewhere, and they know they're in an artificial reality, and yet they can't get out. They seem to have embraced it a lot more fully than Wanda and the Vision have. But you kind of have to wonder: is it some sort of prison? Like that's kind of what I thought as I was kind of watching that, especially that second episode.
well, yeah, with the second episode, you get the feeling that there's like some, external forces, with the whole scene at the beginning with the banging of the tree on the window,
Mm.
and then later on with the pothole, um,
Yeah,
which was now I'm not sure if that's supposed to be like an AIM uniform or something, or
that very much looks like an AIM uniform, doesn't it? It could
yeah,
be,
but
and we've seen AIM before in Iron Man 3. But I think that's one of the only times we ever see AIM. Um, I don't remember them coming back. And I know the real Mandarin is very much going to feature later on, who was also in Iron Man 3. Not in this show, but in Shang-Chi and in this sort of phase of Marvel stuff. So I wonder if AIM are perhaps going to end up being the big threat this time round, along with the
maybe,
Mandarin.
like I,
Maybe they're going to do it for real this time.
maybe.
I,
Because I hadn't really considered a sort of Pleasant Hill type scenario at all, to be honest. But it could make sense. I mean, that somehow like it's within some sort of controlled, contained setting that she's having these fantasies, and that's why only certain characters feature instead of the entire MCU and having it have rippled out to everyone.
Although we do hear in that second episode, the voice of, I think it's Rhodey. Like I listening to that voice, it's like, oh man, that really sounds like Don Cheadle. And we hear his voice calling out to Wanda, but we don't see him anywhere. We don't necessarily get a sense that he's actually really there. And all of that stuff is very much Ghost in the Machine stuff. So he's calling out from an old wireless radio. And Vision himself is the Ghost in the Machine. He's the spirit of Jarvis, the spirit of Ultron. He's Tony. He's all fused together in this sort of organic robotic body. So I thought that was a nice kind of playthrough on the themes. And I really like that, but I'm kind of, my mind is buzzing over what could this be? What's going on?
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, well, it's at this point, it's kind of, there are different, kind of theories you can play with and everything. I think it's a given that this is Wanda, creating this fantasy world.
Okay.
It's her powers, that have sort of built a fantasy, for her, with her lost love, sort of the, what if scenario. Oh, this is what my life should have been, and now we've gotten to the point at the end of episode 2 where she's pregnant, which is very which is very like, okay, so, I'm going to just be really mad if they don't make it the twins, who both end up featuring as, characters that we come to know and love later in comics.
Right.
And it would be, them missing a trick big time if they don't, in my opinion.
And again, I don't know too much about those two characters because I only know a little bit from House of M.
Okay, well, those two characters end up being members of the Young Avengers team.
Right. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. What's the character names?
Teddy Kaplan and Tommy. I can't remember his last name, but like, they end up being like, brothers separated at birth. Yeah. Yeah.
Which is very much inverse.
Like growing up without Wanda, because Wanda's out of the comics for ages after basically House of M. Right. She just kind of, is off the map for like, I don't know, 10 or 15 years worth of comics for the most part.
And we did get a Scarlet Witch series back in, I want to say 2016, 2017. We got a short-lived Scarlet Witch mini-series.
Yeah, she sort of came back in a Young Avengers storyline called Children's Crusade, and was sort of then accepted back like gradually, because everyone was pretty mad at her for many reasons,
ruining their lives. Yeah.
Yes, among other terrible reasons. But she then sort of gradually got brought back in, and she was part of Rick Remender's Avengers team when he was writing that book. So she's been back for a while, as a good guy. But she's one of those characters who the reason I love the Scarlet Witch, she's one of my favorite female Marvel characters, is because she kind of treads that line, and she always has. She was always kind of, she's Magneto's daughter, and, so she's sort of a baddie to begin with, but then the Avengers make her part of the team. And so she's always kind of flip-flopped a little. She's always kind of tread the line between, villainy and superheroism. And, and that's what makes her kind of interesting to me, and so the fact that they could make her the catalyst for something terrible, is, isn't surprising. It works. But then, you also want to root for her as coming back with the good guys. So that's where I kind of think they might be going with this stuff in the comics. We know that she's going to feature in Doctor Strange and the Multiverse of Madness. But to what extent, we don't know. We don't know whether she's going to be a good guy or a bad guy.
And we know that stuff is going to connect to Spider-Man. I don't know what it's going to be called.
Yeah, I don't
now. But we know the multiverse stuff is going to connect there if rumors are to be believed about all the casting and things like that. But it's whether or not they bring in those guys for 5 minutes or for half an hour. How much I always, wonder sort of how much a lot of that stuff is actually going to be a major part of the storyline, or how much is it just going to be a throwaway thing? Because I think one of the interesting things about the MCU is their ability to take long-standing characters and drop names and drop hints and just very quickly fire it off, and it's done and it's dealt with. And a lot of it is kind of calling back to the comics, and is, if you want to use the term fan service, it is fan service, but it's done well, And I don't know how much this will then bleed through, but it does seem to be. I wrote about this for the site a few weeks back. It does seem to be kind of the thing that's going to set up phase 4, right? And the way it's going to kind of all kind of bleed out. I mean, I don't know how it would affect something like, say, Shang-Chi or, Moon Knight. It might definitely bleed into, because you have a guy who can't really perceive reality in the same way as we do, and especially not his own individual reality. But I mean, for the most part, I thought it was a great kind of opening couple of episodes.
Yeah,
I
yeah,
can't think of anything I didn't enjoy. I love the fact that effectively you get an episode of Bewitched and then you get an episode of I Love Lucy.
right,
And the situations that they find themselves in are very much sitcom situations. It's got to impress the boss who's coming over for dinner, got to impress the neighbours, and they all kind of bleed into that thing of fitting in.
right. Which, I mean, obviously, you sort of mentioned, oh, there's a very obvious book that we're going to mention, yada, yada, yada. I'm guessing that you're talking about Tom King's The Vision,
Yeah.
with Gabriel Hernandez Walta from a couple of years ago, which is a fantastic, fantastic book. And that is very much about,
Everyone through that, but that's fantastic.
The character of, The Vision moving to the suburbs and trying to fit in, with the neighbors in, idyllic American suburbia, with, wife, kids, dog, etc.
Well, the key thing to point out there is the family is of Vision's creation. They're very much the robots that he has sort of asked Tony Stark to help him create so he can have a family. And in a way, it's kind of a big experiment. But that also makes me think that I remember back in Infinity War when Shuri was talking about, and Banner were talking about, that there will still be vestiges of the Vision left.
Right.
So I wonder how much was still in the kind of computer banks in Wakanda. Do you know what I mean? So again, my mind is kind of buzzing with, has the Vision created somehow this?
I mean, yeah, that's actually a possibility I hadn't really considered. Like, in my mind, it's been very much like Wanda. This is all, Wanda's creation. But
I'm sure you will be.
It's within both of their capabilities to do that in a way. I mean, she I think he wouldn't be able to create the alternate reality that she's built, with the sitcom and everything like that. But as far as the, idyllic suburban, life, that's something he was willing to artificially create as well.
Yeah. So, and I don't know. I mean, one of the reasons why I think it's entirely possible it might be the Vision's creation is that it's a media-based environment. It's not like they've gone and created real life. What they've created was always an artifact. So one of the fascinating things about that I kind of realised as I grew older and watched American sitcoms was they are entirely artificial. So when people open their front doors, you're not looking out at a real street, you're looking out at a painted backdrop. And that occurs today in a lot of soap operas. I mean, when I was sort of in school and we used to come home and watch Neighbours and things, you would see this painted backdrop or photographed backdrop. And I wonder if it was the Scarlet Witch's version, it would be based on a real environment or situations they'd actually lived in, places they'd lived. But being the Visions, he's kind of sampled a media-based kind of life. Because he doesn't know how to replicate real life. He got as far as replicating a human body, but would he really know what real life is? I don't know. I'm just firing crap off.
Yeah, no, I like it.
So that kind of has got me thinking. There's a lot to kind of unpack and look at it. But I kind of love the way that in addition to a very satisfying MCU show, you also got two satisfying sitcom episodes.
Yeah, and then but both of them, like, you know, with their each had this little really dark moment in it. You know, you had the all the fun of the sitcom episode, but then something that was like, oh, okay, that just chilled me to the bone. Like, when she first starts to see color in the second episode, and you just know something's wrong. You get this, like, I think because it is, sort of the juxtaposition of, like, the sort of like light sitcom, and then this, oh, okay, you see that something's not right. It's all the more jarring for that. And in the first episode, it was when the boss is choking.
Yeah. And the wife is constantly repeating,
"Stop it!
Stop it! Stop it! Stop!" Yeah, which is very unsettling, as you say.
Yeah.
And in the second,
we're going to start to see probably more and more of that as it goes.
Yeah.
Which, I just think it's really great storytelling. It's like, because you can get totally lost in the sitcom episode itself, but, the way they're telling you, like, oh, okay, things are not as they seem, is done in very deft little strokes,
So did you know that originally the showrunners, I think, or the director, talked to Dick Van Dyke? They had like a long meeting with Dick Van Dyke over kind of what are the beats you want to hit for sitcoms, and things like that. And in fact, I think they filmed on the studio that was either Bewitched or I Love Lucy was originally filmed on. So they're kind of sampling that stuff, but with love and with care and attention to detail, which I really like.
Right. Yeah. I mean, because I got some of the Dick Van Dyke Show in, because I'm guessing it was kind of an amalgamation of different, 1950s, 1960s sitcoms, with, like, the obvious ones being Bewitched. And
I did very much feel the first one was Bewitched. Yeah, and the second one was I Love Lucy. And the situations in those were the kind of situations you'd find specifically in those sitcoms. Now, of course, next we're moving into the 70s, which is kind of an interesting time for those sort of shows, because that's when they would have started to come more down to earth. And I think some of the artifacts would have started to drop away. So that's kind of interesting to me. I wonder what we're going to see in the next episode. Just in terms of the performances, I really liked Elizabeth Olsen's kind of performance. When does she drop the accent?
Well, I think that she starts to kind of lose it in Infinity War, at least.
Right.
And I think it starts to change in Civil War. But I mean, I was never a fan of her having that accent. I just thought it was really unnecessary. And, like, well, I mean, I guess they've gone with this whole, like, oh, well, she's Sokovian and, but the accents I really never thought did any favors for her or Aaron Taylor Johnson.
Okay. I quite like them. Like, I
was not a fan. I just thought, because, like, hers particularly, I didn't think was very good. I think she's a very good actress, but I thought the accent was terrible. Like, so I'm really happy to see the back of it.
Right. Okay. I always quite liked them, and I actually did especially like Aaron Taylor Johnson's.
Well, I thought his was better than hers, but Now, did you know? Okay, totally different tangent. But did you know Evan Peters is supposed to be in this?
Yes, and I was going to be really curious to see.
I've remained really spoiler free, so I have no idea what they're going to do with him.
Well, I think they managed to keep a lid on the spoilers. Like, you've seen what they want you to see. Like, just before this got released, I think they brought out every day there was a new promo for it, right. And I stopped trying to keep up in the end. It was just like, okay, I've seen a couple of trailers now. I'm just going to wait for the show. We're so close to release date. But literally from about the 10th of January, it was just promo every day. Different promo. Some of which was kind of interviews with the cast. Yeah, I'm really curious to see what they're going to do with Evan Peters. My money is on...
What is your money on?
Pietro. I think he's going to be.
I've always been really burned up about the fact that they just killed off Quicksilver, just like that, just done post, because I actually really like Quicksilver as a character, and was just mad that was it. And basically, yeah, I mean, it would be incredible if they actually find a way to now just segue into Evan Peters being Quicksilver, and he's just back. And I mean, because she could wish it into reality, and it's like, oh, okay, well, he's back. Looks a little different.
Yeah. I mean, I guess maybe it was easier for them to get Evan Peters than it was Aaron Taylor-Johnson. I don't know.
Probably. I'm sure. I don't think Aaron Taylor-Johnson has expressed any particular interest in being back. And people loved Evan Peters as Quicksilver.
Yeah, he was really good. I really enjoyed him in those movies. And also, it's weird because they kept a lid on some of the other actors that you think they wouldn't really keep a lid on. Emma Caulfield was only kind of allowed to reveal like a few days before that she was going to be in the show.
Right.
So it makes me wonder, is she going to be playing, obviously someone other than she actually is? I mean, all the characters in it seem to be someone other than they are. But, is it going to be a major Marvel character? They're kind of just...
Yeah, I mean, I love Emma Caulfield, so that was like a huge treat for me, just hearing that she was going to be in it. So I'd love if they were, actually sort of building her up to be, somebody identifiable from the Marvel Universe.
And there's a character called Agatha Harkness, who I've heard that Agnes the name
really? Oh, wow.
I don't know though, because she seems as trapped as anyone else, and yet does seem to be functioning as a kind of guide for one.
Oh yeah, she also seems kind of quite happy to be trapped there. Which that would actually, I didn't make that connection, but that would be pretty interesting. I hadn't really considered whether those supporting characters were going to have any greater significance, really. But it seems beyond Monica Rambeau, obviously, whose name I think she's called Geraldine.
Yeah,
in the show so far. So I mean, everybody's obviously got a different name to what their actual name is, apart from Vision and Wanda. It could be that they're anybody.
I love how no one questions the fact that he's called Vision.
Right. Yeah, exactly. That's all part of the weird world that they're in,
No one goes, oh, that's an unusual name. European?
Yeah.
But I'm really loving it. I love Paul Bettany's kind of sitcom heavy performance. I think he plays that stuff quite well, and I think he's having the time of his life doing that.
Yeah, I mean, I see him the scene where he's got the gum in the works, and he's acting like he's drunk at the magic show.
Great. Thought he was going to get fired, apparently. I don't know if that's just sort of hyperbole on his part, but he said when he got the call to come in and kind of talk about the show, he thought they were calling him to say, that is it, you're definitely never coming back, you're done. So he was thrilled that he got a whole show out of it. It's my understanding that this is just going to be the one season.
Right, which, I think with a lot of these shows, they may or may not need more than one season, but because I think it's a different kind of storytelling to even what the Marvel Netflix were, where they existed within their own little corner of the Marvel universe. This is supposed to just be in support of the overall MCU, so it's almost like stories that take place between films and that sort of thing, that do kind of matter if you watch them or not, to how much you're going to get out of the movies. Whereas with the Marvel Netflix stuff, there really was very little connection. It was its own dark corner, where they could kind of just, keep churning out seasons, with those same characters, because that's the only place you were going to see them. You weren't going to see them in the films. So,
although now there is some talk of some of those characters kind of making their way, especially Charlie Cox's Daredevil may show up in She-Hulk, may show up in Spider-Man. They're saying
I mean, I think there's sort of contractual reasons why maybe they couldn't use those characters again right away, but it would be a real shame if they don't bring them back in some form.
Yeah, I think it'd be a waste, especially for me. Like, I'd love to see Luke Cage make a comeback, and I'd love to see more of Iron Fist because I actually quite enjoyed those.
I more Punisher.
Yeah. Well, I'd like to see the Punisher become the Punisher rather than.
Oh, he was the Punisher.
I don't know. I mean, I just
left it. They left it with him as the Punisher. Done.
I don't know. You got 2 seasons of Punisher Begins, and it's just like, okay, I'm done with this now.
I love Punisher again. It was great. Whatever, man.
I'm glad we can stay true to form and disagree on something, Liz.
Yeah. Anyway, yeah, I really would love more Punisher, and I, would love more Daredevil. Those were the 2 standout shows for me of all of them. So yeah, I mean, I'd feel pretty robbed if that never comes to pass.
Yeah, me too. I think I'd like to see those guys slowly be integrated, and of course, Disney is adding a more sort of adult element to their streaming. You've got Star coming in sort of mid or late February, which is going to be the kind of more adult end of Disney's material, and all the Fox stuff, so Aliens and all that kind of stuff is going to be coming onto that. All the stuff they can't show on Disney because Disney Plus, I think the rule is nothing can be above a PG-13 for Disney Plus. So yeah, that's fair. I mean, it is aimed more at kids, so you've got to be careful there. And of course, we have Falcon and the Winter Soldier coming soon in March. Something else I know you're excited about. We're maybe going to talk about those.
Yeah, we'll talk about that. In our Patreon conversation.
But yeah, I mean, I'm loving this. I think we've got a really potentially exciting, fun, different show on here. It's going to, as you say, serve the wider Marvel universe rather than like the Netflix shows we've just seen to serve themselves. And it's great that they're using these different avenues to kind of tell the overall broader story. But I really enjoyed this. Definitely tuning in next Friday for more. Liz, do you want to come back and talk about the next episode?
I would love to.
Cool. That's great. I'd love to have you back on, and hopefully we can talk about whatever's coming next for Marvel. But yeah, we're going to leave it there. Thank you so much, guys, for tuning in. As I said at the beginning, you can support us on Patreon. We'd be really grateful. The Patreon tiers start at sort of £2 a month. They're really cheap. You get bonus audio and video content for that. If you want to go up a tier, you get comics. You get a sort of quarterly comics mail out to you. So I'll send you a brand new #1 comic for you to maybe start a new series or just read a one-shot story. You can find that all on the website, thecomiccrush.com. You can follow us at The Comic Crush on Twitter and Instagram. You can find the Comic Crush page on Facebook. Liz, can people follow you anywhere?
I am on Twitter at Liz C. Jordan.
Cool. And you can find Liz there and catch up with her and her views on comics and things, which I'm sure she'll be happy to tell you. Liz, it's been fantastic. Thank you very much. We'll see you in a moment for the Patreon stuff. Thank you very much to everyone watching. Thanks for watching our very first show, and we'll catch you next time on The Crush.
Bye.
Bye.